early exit from the last World Cup.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. The Prime Minister's insisted that the UK will be able to strike trade deals around the world after Brexit. It comes after President Trump suggested the withdrawal agreement sounded like a great deal for the EU and might hamper a future trade deal between the US and the UK. Well, in another blow for Mrs May, the former Defence Secretary Sir Michael Fallon warned that her Brexit deal is doomed and said he would vote against it. But today the Prime Minister has embarked on a UK-wide push to sell her Brexit plan, with visits to Wales and also Northern Ireland. Well, our political correspondent Chris Mason has this report.
The big Brexit vote is a fortnight away. Suddenly it feels like a general election campaign, with one candidate, the Prime Minister, and one policy, her Brexit deal. First stop for her today, Builth Wells in mid-Wales.
I'm here today at the Winter Fair at the Royal Welsh, hearing from farmers, from manufacturers, the importance of the certainty that the deal brings, the importance of the free trade area, of the ability to export, continue to export well with the European Union in the future, that we see in that political declaration for our future relationship on trade with the European Union.
But her critics are everywhere. This man, glass of water in hand, used to walk into this radio studio all the time to defend the government. Take a listen to him now.
My fear is this deal actually just gives us the worst of all worlds. No guarantee of smooth trade in the future and no ability to reduce the tariffs that we need to conclude trade deals with the rest of the world. So unless the Commons, I think, can be persuaded somehow that those things are possible, yes, then I think the deal is doomed.
And with friends like that, the Prime Minister could do without what you're about to hear from the President of the United States. Who does he think has won in the negotiation between the UK and the European Union?
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, you know, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us.
Downing Street insists an independent trade policy is possible under its plan, but with criticism raining down on the Prime Minister, people on all sides of this debate are now marshalling their arguments, hoping that their plan can replace hers when it's defeated. Some passionate Brexiteers say leaving the EU with no deal is fine, reckon Mrs May's vision is the worst deal in history, and are not surprised by President Trump's intervention.
He's not only pro-British, pro-Brexit, pro-believing that nation-states should make deals together, but right from day one of being elected, he saw a big, all-encompassing trade deal with the UK as being a very important thing. Firstly for our two countries, and secondly for him to say to everybody, I'm not protectionist, I believe in free trade when it's between countries that are equivalents.
And from those arguing for no deal to those arguing for no Brexit. Some young campaigners gathered in Westminster this morning to make their case. If you get the feeling anything could happen in the next few months, you might just be onto something. Chris Mason, BBC News.
All right, in a moment we're going to speak to our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy, but first let's go to our assistant political editor Norman Smith at Westminster. So, Norman, pretty unwelcome interventions then from people who are supposed to be the Prime Minister's friends and allies, but she's back this lunchtime.
She is, but you do have to wonder, Ben, whether at her morning meetings Mrs May feels like turning round to her advisers and saying, if any of you got any good news, because there is a sense that this is beginning to slip away from Mrs May. Yesterday she had another mauling in the Commons. Overnight President Trump saying that a deal was a good deal for the EU, and then of course Sir Michael Fallon's intervention. And there is a sense that some of those middle ground MPs who haven't previously expressed a view are now beginning to turn against Mrs May. During which Mrs May is away from Westminster, embarking on this nationwide tour, and there is a view, I think, amongst some of her supporters that maybe she might be better spending her time trying to strong-arm recalcitrant Tory MPs in the tea rooms and bars and committee rooms of Westminster, rather than spending her morning at the sort of Royal Welsh Showground at a winter fair in Llanelwedd, lovely though that might be.
All right, Norman, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get the latest on the Prime Minister's nationwide tour. We can go to Emma Vardy, who's in Belfast. And Emma, she's heading to Northern Ireland next.
That's right, and here many Northern Ireland businesses have broadly welcomed the deal. They say it's not perfect, but it would remove the need for any hard border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic and would prevent any immediate disruption to trade. So Theresa May can take some relief from some of that support she will get here. But when it comes to Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party, it is a totally different story. The DUP have refused to budge an inch in their opposition to this deal, and all of Theresa May's efforts and reassurances are failing to bring them round. The DUP's problem has always been they see it that this deal would put Northern Ireland into a different regime from the rest of the UK. Just have a listen to the DUP leader Arlene Foster speaking to our political editor Laura Koonsberg this morning.
I think the disappointing thing for me is that the Prime Minister has given up, and she's saying this is where we are and we just have to accept that. But she may have given up on further negotiations and trying to find a better deal, but I haven't given up. I believe in a better way forward, and I believe we must find that.
Now, it's important to say that some other Northern Ireland parties, including Sinn Féin, have cautiously welcomed this deal, but it's the DUP's votes who will count when it comes to Parliament.
Emma, thank you very much indeed. Emma Vardy there for us in Belfast, and also thanks to Norman Smith, our assistant political editor at Westminster. So then, what trade deals could Britain strike with other countries under the terms of Theresa May's Brexit deal? Well, let's talk to our reality check correspondent Chris Morris, who's here. And President Trump pretty critical of the Brexit deal overnight in terms of doing a possible trade deal with the United States. Does he have a point?
Well, the political declaration between the EU and the UK approved on Sunday does talk about an independent trade policy, but as long as we're in a post-Brexit transition, or if there were to be a single customs territory under the so-called backstop plan, then we wouldn't be able to sign or implement, not sign, implement free trade deals, cutting tariffs on goods with the United States or any other country around the world. But it's not just about tariffs, it's also about regulations more broadly. We've heard a lot about things like chlorinated chicken and hormone-treated beef, which are treated very differently in the United States and Europe. But it's also about big businesses like chemicals or pharmaceuticals. You're either, in a way, in one of the big regulatory regimes around the world, the EU, or you can lean towards the United States. It's not entirely either or, but at the moment there is still a choice to be made. And if the UK wants to stay close to the EU in the future, it will be more difficult to do trade deals with the United States. We can look at some of the numbers as well. It's worth remembering. Those are the numbers for UK trade with the United States last year. Big numbers, but have a look at trade last year with the rest of the EU. 112 billion exports to the US, 274 billion to the EU 27. So for a lot of big companies here, they're still saying, look, the EU is a massive consumer market right on our doorstep, so they are encouraging the government to lean towards those EU rules and regulations.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Chris Morris. Well, meanwhile, judges at the European Court of Justice are considering whether the UK could halt Brexit and remain in the European Union without permission from the other member states. A cross-party group of British politicians has brought the case, arguing that Parliament could stop Brexit if MPs vote down the Prime Minister's deal. Ministers say the case is only hypothetical, as the government has no plans to remain in the EU. Other news now, and a bus company has been fined more than £2 million after it ignored warnings about a driver who crashed into a supermarket, killing 2 people. The Midland Red bus careered into the Sainsbury's store in Coventry 3 years ago, killing a 7-year-old boy and a pensioner. Well, the trial heard that the driver, who was 77 at the time, had mistaken the accelerator for the brake. Catherine Stancheshin reports.
The moment Kailash Chanda lost control of his double-decker bus, failing to brake, pressing hard on the accelerator instead. Seconds later, it smashed into a supermarket, killing 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald, who'd been sitting at the front of the top deck. 76-year-old Dora Hancocks, who'd been crossing the road that afternoon, was also killed. The court heard it was lucky more people weren't injured. Kailash Chanda was 77 at the time of the accident and was diagnosed afterwards with dementia. His driving had become increasingly erratic. Mr. Chanda had had several previous crashes. There had been repeated complaints by customers, and just 6 months prior to the crash he had been assessed in-house. Bosses were told fatigue was affecting his driving. On the day of the accident, Kailash Chanda had already worked a 75-hour week. He was deemed unfit to stand trial at a previous hearing. The bus company, which pleaded guilty to 2 health and safety offences, admitted their failure to act had tragic consequences.
Our own detailed policies were not followed as closely as they should have been. There were failures at an operational level in driver supervision, and we deeply regret the opportunities that were missed to act decisively on emerging warning signs.
In a statement, the Fitzgerald family said their lives have been changed forever.
We will always feel anger over the cruel and unnecessary way Rowan died. Anger at not only the driver, Kailash Chanda, but also the bus company, which we feel did not do enough to stop the driver being a danger to others.
Midland Red says it has made key changes and now has much more robust safety measures in place. But the judge said the £2.3 million fine reflects the fact that the public was put at risk not just on that day, but for months beforehand. Catherine Stancheshian, BBC News, Birmingham.
The British academic freed from jail in the United Arab Emirates yesterday has arrived back in Britain. Matthew Hedges was welcomed home by his wife, Daniela Tejada, and members of his family. The Durham University PhD student was pardoned yesterday, having been sentenced to life in prison for spying. Well, our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams is here with me now, and Mr. Hedges has put out a statement thanking his wife.
That's right. I mean, we didn't see them this morning. They crept in and I think were escorted out of Heathrow by the police, away from the cameras. But there was a statement shortly afterwards. Matthew Hedges has described this as a very surreal moment. Let's not forget that it's just 6 days ago that he was facing a life sentence for alleged spying. And as you say, he singles out the work of Daniela, his wife, says, "I could not have done this without her. Seeing her and my family," he says, "after this ordeal is the best thing that could have happened." The statement also quotes her, saying that she's overjoyed and exhausted, and also pointing out that the family needs some time now to process everything that they have been through. No one, she says, should ever have gone through what he did, and it will take him time to heal and recover. He is very overwhelmed. So I don't think we're necessarily going to be seeing him in the short term. Just one other note, Jeremy Hunt, Foreign Secretary, who's been very, very much engaged in this in the last few weeks, he says the whole country is relieved and delighted to have you home, and he's also thanked, as has the family, the efforts of the embassy in the UAE and indeed the Foreign Office as a whole.
All right, Paul, thank you very much indeed. Paul Adams. 2 boats carrying a total of 18 migrants, including an 18-month-old, have been stopped in the Channel. They're the latest of more than 100 people who've been picked up trying to cross to the UK. Simon Jones reports now from Dover.
In the middle of the Channel, in the cold and the dark, 9 migrants, some children, found on a tiny boat. Despite repeated warnings on both sides of the Channel that people are putting their lives at risk trying to cross the busiest shipping lane in the world, it's continuing. The migrants were brought to Dover.
Well, it's unprecedented what is happening at the moment, and it's like crossing the M25 on foot during the rush hour. It is the busiest thoroughfare for shipping in the world. There's over 400 commercial shipping movements a day. They do not have lighting, they do not have experience, they've got an inadequate boat. They're very, very lucky to be alive.
The French authorities rescued another 9 migrants on a fishing boat in the early hours. The Dover lifeboat was involved in one of this morning's rescue operations, and down there beside it you can see just how small the boat on which 9 migrants were found actually is, risking their lives in the cold and the dark. Over the past month, more than 100 migrants have succeeded getting across the Channel in small boats. Most have claimed to be from Iran. It's thought many have flown into Serbia after the country began offering visa-free access to Iranians to boost tourism and trade, then heading to northern France with the goal of getting to the south coast.
What we need to see is we need to see the Home Office and the French authorities working together to find these people traffickers who are behind this and stop them in their tracks before there's a tragedy in the middle of the English Channel.
The Home Office says Border Force patrols have been stepped up, but some are warning that if this continues, the rescue operations could turn into the recovery of bodies. Simon Jones, BBC News, Dover.
It's 1:15, our top story this lunchtime. Theresa May has insisted her Brexit deal will not stop Britain doing trade deals with the rest of the world. That's after President Trump said it does threaten an agreement with the United States. And coming up, one-of-a-kind tributes are paid to the wartime codebreaker Baroness Trumpington, who's died at the age of 96.
Coming up on BBC News, Jose Mourinho says his Manchester United team can watch their Champions League match on TV tonight if they don't fancy the pressure of playing in front of their own fans at Old Trafford.
A 10-year-old boy who had a rare blood disorder has been reunited with the man who helped to save his life. Rupert Cross was diagnosed 4 years ago and spent months in a specialist unit at Great Ormond Street on a course of chemotherapy. But his life was changed when a man who joined the bone marrow register because he saw a woman he liked in the queue for donors turned out to be a match. Well, the chance encounter transformed both their lives, as Look East's Robbie West reports.
So all of these I would have to have.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's why you have a gym.
I would be sick like everywhere.
Oh.
Rupert spent more than 80 days in a specialist treatment unit, diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. The 6-year-old's immune system was failing right in front of his parents' eyes.
I remember the time when his hair was falling out and I was in with a nurse and I was just stroking his hair and it was just coming out in clumps.
I would have done anything to swap places with him. Yeah. It's such a horrific experience.
His only option was to find a willing bone marrow donor who was a close enough genetic match. Unknown to Rupert, in Basildon, someone was about to join the register who had the potential to save his life. Billy Higgins works in a bank. A charity had set up outside and was signing up bone marrow donors. He's the first to admit his initial reasons for joining the register wasn't all about helping others.
Yeah, ended up on the register because the girl I liked was in the queue.
Due to the complexities of Rupert's condition, Billy had to have an operation to remove some of his bone marrow. Rupert has gone on to make a full recovery.
They calm roots.
Billy went to Hemel Hempstead to meet Rupert and his family. He was joined by the girl that he was flirting with in the queue to become a donor.
Day really, a few flakes of snow mixed in with the rain up over the high ground of the Pennines, the Cumbrian Fells and also across the southern uplands as well. And windy, gusts around 50 to 60 miles an hour around the Irish Sea coast and western hills. Overnight, as we clear one band of rain through, we get another one moving in from the west. It will, though, be a milder night compared with recent nights. Looking ahead into Wednesday's forecast, we've got an area of low pressure, and that's just going to be bringing us some really strong winds to the western side of the country. Now, as well as the windy weather, we'll also see some heavy rain. We'll all get some rain on Wednesday, but the heaviest of it is going to be going across Northern Ireland into Scotland, where it could cause a few problems. And the winds, well, very, very windy indeed. Gales, even severe gales, gusts of around 60 to 70 miles an hour around our western coasts and hills through the day. So it will be blustery. We could have some localised transport disruption, but it's those winds that are dragging in the milder air. So temperatures double figures for most. The Northern Isles just still hanging on to something a little bit cooler. What about into Thursday? Well, the main driving area of low pressure is still to the west of the UK. But we've got another one that's going to be spinning up close to us. Now, there's some uncertainty about the depth of this low. If it becomes a little bit deeper, it could be a bit stronger. We could get winds gusting to 70 or even 80 miles an hour around some of our Irish Sea coast. But that is pretty uncertain. What looks likely at the moment is that it's just going to be a wet and a windy kind of day, with all of us seeing outbreaks of rain. We're still into the mild air, though, with temperatures between 10 and 13 degrees. Now we'll take a look at the weather forecast as we end the week and into the weekend. It's still an unsettled weather pattern. We've got mild air for most of the UK, but something a little bit cooler at times in Scotland, with temperatures, for example, in Edinburgh, around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. So some windy weather on the way, strongest winds tomorrow across the western side of the country. Ben.
All right, Chris, thank you. And that is all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, now we'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.
Time for some sports here on BBC News. Hello, I'm Hugh Ferris. After being made one of the scapegoats by some for England's embarrassing early exit at the 2015 Rugby World Cup, Sam Burgess has hit back today, blaming individual egos and selfish players. Burgess switched codes back to rugby league following the tournament, when England became the first host nation to fail to get out of the group stage. And after receiving more criticism today for his part in that, he said on Twitter in response, "If people actually re-watch the games I participated in, you will see I added to the team. What cost us an early exit was individual egos and selfish players not following our leader, which essentially cost the coach and other great men their jobs. Tournaments are not won by the coaching staff or one player. It takes a commitment from the full group. I guarantee you this, I was committed, but others had their own agendas." Both Manchester clubs could make it through to the last 16 of the Champions League tonight. City are away to Lyon. United take on the Swiss side Young Boys. It's been suggested the United team feels more pressure playing at Old Trafford, where they haven't actually won yet in Europe. But manager Jose Mourinho has no time for that.
If you feel pressure, stay at home. But when I say home, I don't say stadium home. I say home, and watch on TV. If you feel pressure to play matches at home where the people come to support, come on. I never felt pressure to play at home.
The UK Snooker Championship begins today at the Barbican in York, with Judd Trump and defending champion Roddy O'Sullivan once again among the favourites. Trump is often referred to as one of the best players to have never won the world title, but he says he is hurt by suggestions that he doesn't always try hard enough.
When you look at me and Ronnie, if we're losing, it's because we're not trying or we don't want to be there and stuff like that, compared to maybe John Higgins, Mark Selby. They're always the same, taking their time over the shots, and they always look like they're trying their best. But I think me, Ronnie, Jack Wazowski, we're all trying our best to the same every game. We're trying our heart out, and yeah, I know myself how much work I've put in each tournament, so obviously it does hurt sometimes when people say you're not trying.
Jonny Bairstow has become the latest English cricketer to try his hand at the shortest form of the game. After returning to the Test side and winning man of the match in Colombo, he has signed a short-term deal with the Kerala Knights in the T10 League, which is being played at the moment in the UAE. The team's captained by the England one-day skipper Owen Morgan. Meanwhile, England women's cricket captain Heather Knight says it would be great for the sport if a T20 competition was included in the Commonwealth Games. The ICC has put in a bid for it to be played at the 2022 Games in Birmingham.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think, having seen the women's netball team, the sort of reach they got when they won that gold medal, I think it's a logical step for the sport. I think it'll be brilliant. It'll get more girls playing the game globally, I think, and yeah, I think it'd be quite special to be able to play in the Commonwealth Games.
Just to let you know that we're hearing that Sol Campbell has agreed to become the new manager of Macclesfield Town in League Two. In fact, the league's bottom side. You can find out more on that, and indeed when it is confirmed, on the BBC Sport website, as ever. The week of build-up before Wilder against Fury is very much the lead at the moment. A fascinating piece by our boxing correspondent, Mike Costello. So head to bbc.co.uk for everything until we return in Afternoon Live at 2 o'clock.
All right, Hugh, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring you more on the latest on Brexit now. The Prime Minister's been trying to sell her Brexit deal to Parliament and to the public, embarking on a tour of the UK, visiting Wales and Northern Ireland today. She's been at a winter fair in Wales today, where she's been talking to members of the public and stall holders, and she's insisted that her deal will allow the UK to pursue an independent trade policy.
If you look at the political declaration, which sets out the future framework for our relationship with the European Union, it clearly identifies that we will have an independent trade policy, and we will be able to do trade deals, to negotiate trade deals with countries around the rest of the world. And as regards the United States, we've already been talking to them about the sort of agreement that we could have in the future. We've got a working group set up, which is working very well, has met several times, continuing to work with the US on this.
But as Sir Michael Fallon has said this morning, you know, for the Brexiteers, one of the biggest Brexit prizes is the ability to strike free trade deals after Brexit, and one of the biggest potential prizes, an American free trade deal, looks in doubt. The US President's comments have to be taken seriously.
The what the political declaration makes clear is we will have an independent trade policy. We will be able to strike trade deals around the rest of the world. We're talking, well, we have a working group that is working with the United States, looking at exactly this issue, but also we're talking with others around the rest of the world about the possibility of trade deals there as well. So, for example, with a number of countries that I met at the summit with Asian countries in Brussels a few weeks ago, talking about a real enthusiasm for trade deals with the UK. We will have that ability outside the European Union to make those decisions on trade deals for ourselves. It will no longer be a decision being taken by Brussels. We will have control of that, and we will strike trade deals that will enhance our prosperity, enhance our economy and bring jobs to the UK.
President Trump put the boot in last night, so Michael Fallon has put it in this morning as well. How disappointing is it that you're losing support of the support of those who have previously been supportive of your plans?
Look, the Brexit deal has been done, has been agreed. I'm obviously taking that to the House of Commons. I'm here today at the Winter Fair at the Royal Welsh, hearing from farmers, from manufacturers, the importance of the certainty that the deal brings, the importance of the free trade area, of the ability to export, continue to export well with the European Union in the future, that we see in that political declaration for our future relationship on trade with the European Union. I think what is important when MPs come to vote is that they think about the national interest. That means delivering on Brexit, but it means doing it in a way that delivers for people in protecting their security, protecting their jobs, protecting their livelihoods. This deal delivers on both of those.
Arlene Foster has told BBC News in the last half an hour or so that you basically gave up, you rolled over when it came to striking a deal with the EU.
No, we have been resisting many of the things that the European Union wanted to put in this deal. Look, when you negotiate, neither side gets 100% of what they want. It is about compromising, but you have to be clear of what your vital interests are, and we have protected those vital interests, and of course that includes protecting the interests of the people of Northern Ireland.
The Prime Minister speaking a little earlier in Wales. MPs have responded to an urgent question tabled by the Conservative John Whittingdale on the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. It comes after Russia captured 3 of Ukraine's naval vessels and 23 crew members on Sunday. While speaking on behalf of the government, the Foreign Office Minister Alistair Burt condemned Russia's actions, saying it has shown its willingness to violate Ukrainian sovereignty.
My right honourable friend refers to a serious escalation which the recent incidents have illustrated, and the United Kingdom government absolutely agrees with that. I'm pleased to mention the recent visit of my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, and other proposals. We have no plans to change conduct of activity in the area. He asked whether it's a breach of international law. The United Kingdom's assessment is that under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, states can require any warship not in compliance with the laws and regulations of the coastal state to leave immediately. However, Russia's actions in ramming, boarding and seizing vessels do not conform with the law of the sea. Russia's actions were disproportionate, particularly as the ships had left the area returning to the Black Sea. And the 2003 Sea of Aval bilateral treaty between Ukraine and Russia provides for free passage of military and civilian vessels of both states through the Kerch Straits and in the Sea of Azov. So my right honourable friend is right to suggest this is a breach of international law. I know the Prime Minister has today received a request to speak to Ukrainian Prime Minister, and I know that in her busy timetable she will be giving that urgent consideration.
Now, just an update on that story. We've heard from the Russian news agency TASS reporting that a court in Crimea, which has been annexed by the Russians, that court has ordered the first of those Ukrainian Navy sailors who were captured to be detained for 2 months. Those sailors who were detained on Sunday when Russia seized those 3 Ukrainian vessels. So the first of those sailors have appeared in court and have been detained for 2 months. That's the latest development. Now, the final election of this year's midterms takes place in the United States, in the state of Mississippi. Race has become the dominant issue after the Republican candidate made comments about public hangings, for which she has apologized. Her opponent hopes to become the first African-American candidate to hold a statewide office for more than a century. Our Washington correspondent Chris Buckler reports.
The politics of modern America can feel chained to the past. At the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, they make a point of remembering years of racial division and racist attacks. There are 800 steel monuments hanging here, one for every county where lynchings took place, including many in Mississippi. It's that history that has made this statement by Republican Senate candidate Cindy Hyde-Smith so controversial. The parallels with lynchings have made race an issue in a campaign where she's facing Mike Espy, an African-American candidate.
That this comment was twisted and it was turned into a weapon to be used against me, a political weapon.
Well, no one twisted your comments because your comments were live. You know, it came out of your mouth.
Normally Republicans would regard this as a pretty safe seat, but the controversy over Cindy Hyde-Smith's comments have left this a much tighter battle. It's why Donald Trump is in Mississippi, holding not one but 2 rallies on the eve of the election. The president has defended his candidate, but Cindy Hyde-Smith's words have led some to suggest that America has still to truly face up to its past. Chris Buckler, BBC News.
In a moment, we're going to have all the latest business news for you. Mariam is standing by with that. First, a quick look at our headlines. Theresa May is on the road trying to rally support for her Brexit deal, as she insists that trade agreements will still be possible. Bus company Midland Red South is fined £2.3 million for ignoring warnings about a driver who killed 2 people in a crash 3 years ago. 18 migrants are rescued from 2 small boats in the English Channel. It's believed that one was carrying an 18-month-old child.
Hello everyone, I'm Mariam Mashiri. In the business news, ramping up the rhetoric, Donald Trump says it's likely the US will raise tariffs on Chinese goods above their current level. The comments come before he meets with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit this weekend. The tariffs will be raised from 10 to 25% on $150 billion worth of goods. UK and Dutch regulators have fined ride-sharing service Uber for a breach that exposed the details of 57 million customers and drivers. The Information Commissioner's Office fined the company £385,000, while the Dutch Data Protection Authority imposed a fine of €600,000. Thomas Cook has warned that annual profits are set to come in £30 million lower than expected, blaming them on summer heatwave. It's the second profit warning the firm has issued in 2 months. Earnings were £88 million lower in the year to September as people delayed booking holidays because of the prolonged heatwave at home. Now, Pets at Home joins a growing number of UK businesses stockpiling products worth millions of pounds ahead of a possible no-deal Brexit. Chief Executive Peter Pritchard, who took over in April amid slumping profits, says they need certainty and clarity from the government. Meanwhile, Mr Pritchard has overseen an overhaul of the business and today announced that 30 vet practices are set for possible closures. Let's talk now to Paul Hickman, consumer and retail analyst at Edison Investment Research. Paul, thanks for joining us. Before we talk about Brexit and the impact on companies, the problem with its veterinary services has been a big issue for Pets at Home. What's happening here?
Yeah, well, there is just a national shortage of vets, and the company is struggling against that. They are really pushing out the boat to encourage and develop vets as they get into business. They point out, of course, people don't often change their vets, so they're trying to get vets who are just starting in business.
Why is it so hard to find vets these days? Why are companies like Pets at Home struggling?
It's just really that probably not enough vets are training, and certainly not enough in the UK, so quite a number of their vets are having to come from overseas.
We've been talking about companies stockpiling ahead of a possible no-deal Brexit. Pets at Home is one of these companies that has said it's doing precisely that.
Yes, and I think they're not quite in the same boat as, say, the supermarkets, who are dealing with fresh produce, but all the same, it's just a common sense measure that they would take in case the ports and the roads clog up.
So you wouldn't call this a panicky measure?
No, I wouldn't. I think it's just good sense.
And looking at Pets at Home in recent times, it has enjoyed quite a significant level of growth, hasn't it, Paul? Would it be fair to say that that level of growth was, in the end, just unsustainable, and that's added to its woes?
I think in terms of opening the vets' practices, it came to the market in 2014 saying it would open about 60. It's probably opened 50-odd year on year until now. That probably is unsustainable, especially as we've just been talking about the shortage of vets. So they're going to move down to about 10 a year for the next couple of years, buy some back, and as you say, unfortunately, some will have to close.
And of course, all of this has created what, in practical terms, can only be described as a hole in the numbers, in the figures.
Yes, I think that's right. We've heard today about total provisions of £49 million spread across 2 years. That's on a business making about £85 million.
So what does that mean exactly
profit.
in basic terms?
Well, it's about half their pre-tax profit.
OK, Paul Hickman, thank you very much indeed.
Welcome.
Right, let's take a look at some of the day's other business headlines. And Topps Tiles is also planning to invest £3 million on stocking up on its most popular products to shield it against supply chain disruptions from Brexit. Britain's biggest tile retailer, which has around 370 stores, today reported lower annual pre-tax profit and a decline in sales over the last few weeks. Shares in Greggs soared after the bakery chain upped its full-year profit outlook thanks to a rise in sales following strong autumn trading. The group, which has nearly 2,000 shops across the UK, saw like-for-like sales growth strengthen to 4.5% in the 8 weeks to November. And women are much more likely than men to get an increase in earnings from going to university. So says an analysis of salaries at the age of 29. The study from the Department of Education and Institute for Physical Studies says women with a degree earn 28% more than non-graduate women. Men with degrees earn an average of only 8% more than non-graduate men. Quick look at the stock market before we go, and it's not looking particularly good for the markets across the board. Why? Well, ahead of that G20 summit, we've had some strong words from President Trump regarding the trade relationship with China, and that has made the markets and investors worry. That's all the business news from me. I'll be back in an hour's time, but for now, Ben, back to you.
Thanks, Mariam. Now, an intolerable burden's been placed on police forces in England and Wales because of a national crisis in mental health care. That is according to a watchdog. The Inspectorate of Constabulary says that officers are being left to pick up the pieces and respond to tens of thousands of incidents that should be handled by mental health workers. Well, the Home Office said it is investing in services and has praised police leadership. Zoe Billingham is in Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies and says that the police are not the right people to look after those vulnerable people.
This is all about people who need a response from health practitioners, doctors and nurses. The police must often go out and find people when they're in crisis and a danger to themselves or to others, but then the police need to be able to make sure that those people can be put into a place of safety and properly looked after in a healthcare setting. It is simply not right that people who are ill are being held in the back of police cars and in police cells until hospital beds are available to them. The police do a great job in very difficult circumstances, but the system needs to be fixed.
Zoe Billingham there. Well, Lord Adebowale is the Chief Executive of the Health and Social Care Enterprise Turning Point, and he's been explaining the system's weaknesses.
When you ring 999, if there's someone in crisis with a mental health issue, if you say there's a policeman present, actually the ambulance algorithm will reduce your urgency. So the police are then left having to deal with a situation without the ambulatory response and without the direct clinical response. Now that has improved. In some places they do have police with mental health professionals on patrol, and that has reduced that, but it doesn't happen everywhere, and therefore there is a risk that the police will be left holding the baby, as it were.
Now then, you may not have heard of Deaky Duncan, but he's been the voice of Radio 77 for more than 40 years. The station doesn't have a licence, so it can only be beamed through a speaker from his shed into his living room to an audience of, well, just one. That's his wife. Now that could all be about to change because he's now been offered a 1-hour special radio show. Jane McCubbin has been to meet him.
Let me take you back, right back, to a shed in 1970s Stevenage.
Here to try and put a grin around your chin. Special hello, how are you? Going out right now to Mrs. Teresa Duncan, 50th Gondel Crescent in Stevenage.
Fast forward 50 years and 170 miles to Stockport.
You're looking after your ears, my dears. A special hi, hello, going out right now to Pamela Duncan. How in the world are you feeling, my darling?
Deke Duncan is still broadcasting to his audience of one, though it's a different Mrs. Duncan. And it's not a shed.
What do you think is a workshop?
Right.
Is a workshop.
Yes.
You're about to enter Wonderland.
Oh my days.
This Radio 77 2018.
Hit me with it, Deke.
I just love this. This is my world. This is my life. Radio.
Fabulous. I bet you're never off duty, are you? Even in the supermarket.
Yeah, in my head. If you're listening in the car right now, thanks for the ride. Taking your ears through the years. Looking after your ears, my dears. 77 coming at you today with the Mountain of Music guaranteed. Uncle Deke Duncan right here in the air chair.
This is true love. A love so pure, even the missus approves.
I think it's wonderful. You know, he lives it, he believes it, he does it, and as he said to me many times, he said, it's just between me and the mic.
This priceless nationwide film gave Deke 5 minutes of fame 5 decades ago.
I'm going to the shops, right, Deke?
My ultimate ambition would be to broadcast this to the rest of Stevenage. I'd like to share it with them.
But the real job in radio never materialised until this was shared once again.
Hi Deke, it's Laura Moss, the station editor at Three Counties Radio. I want to offer you a 1-hour special over Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So Deke, your dream is going to be a reality.
Well, you better pass the tissues. Hey, you got that right there, babe.
In fact, in the media storm that followed, Deke's had more than an offer of a one-off show.